over to the fifth classification of enzymes, which is the isomerase enzyme. Now, what it does is to catalyze the transfer of groups from one position to another on the same molecule. Now, if you look at the example I gave, phosphoglucoisomerase, what does this enzyme do? It is the enzyme that is responsible for the transfer of, or will I say, the conversion of glucose 6-phosphate to fructose 6-phosphate in the glycolytic pathway. I know some of you might be confused. You say, what is this glycolytic pathway this guy has been saying for a very long time? But it is just important that you cannot discuss enzymes or classification of enzymes without alluding it to the glycolytic pathway. So just know that the phosphoglucoisomerase enzyme is responsible for the conversion of glucose 6-phosphate to fructose 6-phosphate. Now, this is just an additional knowledge for you. Glucose 6-phosphate and fructose 6-phosphate are actually cis-carbon sugars. That means they are both hexose sugars, right? Now, the only difference is that glucose 6-phosphate has an aldehyde functional group attached to it, while fructose 6-phosphate has a ketone functional group attached to it. Hence, we can say glucose 6-phosphate is an aldo sugar, while fructose 6-phosphate is a ketose sugar. That's by the way anyway. So let's go over to the sixth on the list. It is known as the ligase enzyme. These ligase enzymes, they are responsible for joining of two molecules to form a new bond. These ones, we refer to them as a molecular glue. You know what a glue is? Like your super glue. It is used in joining two things to make it bigger or to enhance the productivity. And an example I gave here is this glutathione synthase. You know, the glutathione here is actually a very powerful antioxidant in your body that is responsible for fighting off of different radicals that might come into your system and also relieving oxidative stress. So this particular enzyme is what initiates the joining of two distinct amino acids, for example glycine and glutamine cysteine, to form glutathione. All these things I'm saying might sound a bit ambiguous because I am now talking biochemistry, but that's by the way. But all I want you to note is that for ligase, they catalyze the joining of two molecules to form a new bond, and a good example of a ligase enzyme is glutathione synthase. Now, this is where most books or most textbooks will stop normally, but I am going over to tell you that there is a new class of enzyme known as a translocase enzyme. It is currently adopted in most texts. If you're reading, for those of you that will be reading Principles of Biochemistry, if you look at the 7th edition or the 8th edition, this one is introduced. We have translocase as a class of enzyme, but if you're looking at previous editions, you will not see it there. So the translocase enzyme basically catalyzes the movement of ions or molecules across membranes or their separation within membranes. A good example of this enzyme is ubiquinone reductase. This ubiquinone reductase is also known as a complex 1 enzyme. If you're talking about ETC, do you know what ETC means? It is not etc. in this context. No, ETC stands for electron transport chain. Now, in the electron transport chain, we have 4 complexes. Complex 1 is known as ubiquinone reductase. This enzyme is responsible for the pumping of electron in the inner mitochondria. I don't want to talk about that because it is beyond the scope of this study or this video. But just know that a good example of a translocase enzyme is ubiquinone reductase. With all of this being said, I want to believe that you fully understood the classification of enzymes. I said initially we classify enzymes based on the kind of reaction they catalyze, and I have gone to also say that enzyme classification is based on the reaction they carry out, and also there is a systematic way for classifying enzyme. This isomerase enzyme is EC5, this is EC6, and this is EC7. Now, there is also a way to identify the enzyme commission number of a particular enzyme when you see it, but that will be for another video. I'm going to teach you guys that. But for now, just go, if you're going through this video, if you watch it and you don't understand, you watch it again and it will make more sense to you. And if you also do your research, you'll discover that everything I'm saying here is actually not ambiguous as it looks. So thank you very much, and that will be all for this video. See you guys in the next video on Learn Extra.